I'll answer any general questions that you don't specify, but if you want to ask particularly Joseph or Heather something, just direct it to them. What do you want to know? We'll start. I'll do you and a couple later. Let's start over here. Yeah.
Hey, Manuel, thanks for putting this on in SSDP2. That was extremely informative and powerful. I know there were a couple questions earlier about specifics related to the MAP-sponsored MDMA study and dosage and stuff, and I wanted to introduce myself. I'm the study coordinator for the Marin MDMA study, and soon Libby here will be taking over the role, but I'll be around afterwards to, if anybody has specifics to answer that.
Could you just describe what the Marin study is?
The Marin study is an MDMA-assisted psychotherapy study looking at 18 participants for anxiety and depression related to life-threatening illness. So it's different than the PTSD study. It's the first study of its kind, and we started. We had the initiation visit, which is sort of the kickoff of the study in April. So we've been rolling along since then.
Great. What's your name?
John Harper.
John Harper. Oh, I recognize your name.
Yeah.
Hi. Great. And go ahead.
So I've noticed I noticed starting going to rave and electronic music type events in the Bay Area starting in maybe 2004, 2005. We'd heard of DanceSafe, but we never really saw you guys around at events at that time. I think that was when the Rave Act was pretty new and harm reduction all over was in poor shape. It seems like in the last couple of years, I think I saw that you guys were lightning in a bottle. There's Zendo also lightning in a bottle, and at Burning Man. Harm reduction seems to be on an upswing right now. What's changed?
Well, lightning in a bottle is Dee Fleming, who has an enlightened attitude and is welcoming a harm reduction approach. There are a handful of festivals that are really setting the bar in North America, and despite the more hostile political culture here, Shambhala and some others too. Burning Man hasn't normally been, but like they've never allowed DanceSafe, but they have allowed Zendo, and will again next year. Burning Man's different.
Well, I can speak to that.
Yeah.
Burning Man had its own internal harm reduction team that was very sort of low-key due to the politics of being on federal land. So bringing in outside recognized entities was not politically wise at the time, but obviously things have changed because Zendo is now a welcome part of the community there, and they're providing a different type of service to the participants rather than this more sort of emergency intervention type resources that were there that weren't as visibly publicly, but have been in place since around the year 2000.
So I can say two other reasons too. One, I believe, is Missy Woolrich, the new executive director of DanceSafe, who's done an excellent job she comes from a public health background, and so she's doing a great job upping DanceSafe's profile and getting them in place. She works well with promoters, and to the degree that they are allowing us in, it's largely to her work. The other thing is that I believe the media these days has become much more pro harm reduction than it was back then. And I think that's because a lot of the same young people who were using DanceSafe services back then are now in the media. They're in public health positions. They're taking power, and we're seeing the sort of gradual, progressive change that gives me some hope. So.
And just to add on that, working with a lot of production teams, they are becoming more willing to step out a little bit. They're seeing a few festivals that have tried it. They haven't gotten, the Rave Act has been this boogeyman for years, but there haven't been any actual convictions against promoters that have been really, it's just been this scary thing. And so they're seeing that that's not really something they have to be afraid of. There's still local considerations, but they're willing to take these small steps, and those small steps, they'll allow DanceSafe to provide information, but they won't allow us, for example, Dance Safe to provide testing. So that's like first step, getting in there, providing the information. It's all really valuable sort of small steps, because of course we are coming from a more liberal perspective about that, whereas if you think about the folks that are coming from the most conservative perspective, they've got a lot farther to grow to accept these concepts, and so it's we're making progress at it much faster than I expected, actually.
Yeah. All right, Justin.
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to segue. Hey, I'm Justin. I run the Bay Area Dance Safe. I'm one of the other reasons that you might see Dance Safe more in the Bay Area.
Yay, Justin.
That, and also Richard Gottlieb, the medical director for LIB specifically. But anyways, if you are interested, after all of these stirring tales, getting involved locally, if you like parties, raves, festivals, etc., come talk to me and get involved with Dance Safe here, right now.
Okay, yeah.
So it was the Rave Act that prohibited the use of testing kits at raves, or was that considered paraphernalia that was illegal before?
No, well, the Rave Act prohibits a lot of things, but obviously the one act that a promoter who does fear the Rave Act, would most fear is the testing kits, because the drugs become public in view, and that they're not going and arresting the user who's bringing their pill to the booth could more easily be construed as you are condoning drug use at the event. So, like, the pill testing services are like one of the things that promoters are more afraid of implementing, given the Rave Act. So.
And what, because I believe in the testing kits so much, but I also believe that most of the preparation that you do to reducing harm happens before you take the drugs, and oftentimes at these festivals you take it before, you get there, it's crowded, you're overwhelmed, and so even if you have testing sites available, I wonder what you think is the best, what's the best form of harm reduction we would do in terms of taking MDMA, and
For an individual? Or for us as a society?
And societally, who would be offering that in a utopian world?
Well, for an individual, in the face of prohibition, I gave a lot of advice. Test it first, send the 20 milligrams into the lab to get it tested. Short of that, know who you're buying from. Lower doses. There's 101, but the best form of harm reduction in society is legalization, legalization and strict regulation that removes the stigma, removes the judgment upon drug users, that treats drug use as a normal phenomenon, and when people develop problems with drug use, that is a medical concern, not a law enforcement concern. The vast majority of harms that result from drug use, no matter what drug you pick a drug, results from prohibition. If we outlawed alcohol today, we would dramatically increase the harm from alcohol use.
And do you think the legalization of things to change in terms of the MDMA and the EDM industry, how the two are so tied together now? Do you think it has to come from parents who are sick of their kids dying, or do you think it's festival goers, or what do you?
Where can the change come from? Well, all of us. But I particularly like working with parents, reaching out to parents who've lost kids and finding more enlightened ones like Heather and Dee Dee who understand and want to honor their child and help make change. That parents who've lost a child cannot ever get accused of, oh, you just support harm reduction because you like the drug. And I've gotten that my whole life. Dance Safe gets that all the time. That there's a lot of political power. And that's really why we're seeing such movement today around naloxone, and maybe even the first safe injection site in the United States happening in Seattle. There's a lot of harm reduction movement. The Botticelli, the new ONDCP head, actually spoke at the Harm Reduction Coalition conference. And this is happening because parents who have lost their kids to heroin overdoses are now getting involved and demanding change.
There's a lot of positive impact that festival goers can have by reaching out and contacting the festivals about harm reduction services. One of the easiest ones that have had the biggest impact is that people, a lot of clients that I've worked with, various festivals from small to the largest ones in the US, when they get a lot of emails talking about getting alternatives for, say, free water or more water stations, they actually act on that. But if you don't speak up and say, hey, we need, there needs to be free water or low cost water alternatives to, allow for, safe hydration, because of course, unfortunately, some of these largest, most corporate events still, for them, water is a big money maker, but that's really anathema to public health. And so getting them to, but they'll respond to their patrons if people, the aggregate voice of everybody writing in and contacting them on social media and directly via their web pages or their email addresses saying, hey, we want more of this. I've seen every single festival over time make changes due to no small part do that kind of impact. So I would say continue doing that.
Oh yeah, I was hoping you could speak for a minute about the long-term neurotoxic effects of MDMA use.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
And, like, supplementing helps at all?
Yeah, okay. So this is the big boogeyman, right? In fact, it was what clinched the original banning of MDMA back in 1985 when the DEA couldn't figure out, how to demonize this drug that nobody died from. It wasn't causing any harm that anyone knew of. Then it came out in one of the later appeals that the parent drug MDA had been shown to be neurotoxic in laboratory animals, and so now the big thing came. Oh my God, we're going to produce a generation of brain-damaged youth, and it's neurotoxic, and that was sort of the impetus and the ideology that went forward with banning MDMA. And now here we are, like 30 years later, people have been using it in very high doses, abusing it, misusing it, and we don't have this generation of brain-damaged youth. And in fact, there are, I dare say none, but there's a few that show some minor, memory impairments in really, really heavy users, but I even think those studies are all flawed. And so what we know is that in high doses in laboratory animals, MDMA produces changes in the serotonergic system that can be definitively called, neurotoxic damage, and that those doses probably overlap some doses that humans are taking. In the absence of cognitive impairments, one must ask how important this fact is to public policy, particularly when, we can't stop this drug from spreading anyway. And we have another legal drug that not only is neurotoxic, but that produces definite, severe, permanent, lifelong cognitive impairments in heavy users, and that drug is alcohol. So the question of neurotoxicity is kind of a boogeyman, but I think really says nothing to inform public policy decisions. If we did see indications that MDMA produced cognitive impairments, we still might want to legalize and regulate in order to reduce access to minors, provide proper education and harm reduction information so people could use it safely. That said, if you're concerned about it, the science has shown that the window of neurotoxic damage in laboratory animals, when they've been given large doses of MDMA intravenously, is, at least in rats, between 6 and 12 hours or so after the MDMA. And we know this because of studies using fluoxetine, Prozac, that prevents the neurotoxic damage in the lab animals. If they give the lab animals Prozac up to between up to 12 hours after the massive intravenous dose of MDMA, they don't sustain any neurotoxic damage. The animals that get it after slightly longer start sustaining a little bit of neurotoxic damage. And what this is showing, the best theories around it are that the vulnerability in the serotoninergic system happens after the serotonin is depleted. And then the perhaps dopamine or MDMA metabolite can get into the axon and damage it. These are the theories. But we know that it's not when your brain is when you're feeling the MDMA is not when that neurotoxicity might be happening. It's after you come down. And so, if you're really concerned about it, you could take a Prozac before you come down. The theory there would be that the Prozac, having a higher affinity for the serotonin reuptake transporter, would dislodge the MDMA and plug the serotonin axons so that the toxic metabolite or the dopamine or whatever is normally getting in there can't get in there. So that's as much as I can say about it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Here?
I don't know if you covered this, I might have missed it, but what about supplement uses after, like Rave
Oh,
or 5-HTP?
5-HTP, yeah, I've done a lot of research into this. And so MDMA not only depletes your serotonin, but it also knocks out a key enzyme in the metabolic ladder for creating serotonin. So even diets rich in tryptophan during those days afterwards when you're having low serotonin, it's not going to be as helpful. But 5-HTP is the direct precursor to serotonin in the brain. You can get it at any supplement shop. It's extracted from griffonia seeds, and it just takes one little enzyme that is not depleted to turn it into serotonin. So supplementing with 5-HTP can help restore serotonin levels more quickly after they've been depleted from MDMA use. I like to say, very important, that, and it's only up to you or the individual to do a honest self-assessment. If you are using MDMA very frequently, and the only thing that prevents you from using it frequently is the recovery period, and now you start taking 5-HTP and you recover sooner, please don't let that lead you to continue to take MDMA more frequently, because you will offset any of the benefits that you're getting. Ann Shulgin told me 4 times a year is really the most people should do it. You should know that the more you use MDMA and the more higher doses and the more frequently you use it, the greater the tolerance that you get, and that appears to be permanent and no way to reverse it. Maybe that's related to neurotoxicity, we don't know, but everybody who uses MDMA frequently reaches this point of diminishing returns and just sort of gives up and stops using it because it's just not worth it anymore. And so if you do want to enjoy MDMA or maximize its beneficial effects, whether that's recreational, bonding with your friends, or like therapy learning, improving your relationships with your family, the less frequent that you use it, the longer you'll be able to receive those benefits. So moderation is key. It's why one of the reasons less is more is still the motto, the sort of tagline for Dance Safe. There's no alternative to moderation. Thanks. Okay, yeah.
Last question. Just because I know some people who have terrible come downs, like lots of depression right afterwards.
Yeah.
Is there any way to avoid that besides 5-HTP and supplements? Is there?
Yeah, use a reports indicate that, again, SSRI like Prozac is the best one. This issue of depression is a serious one. Not everyone and not even most people experience a negative hangover after MDMA, which would last a day or two and is typically depression lethargy. Some people, though, really have horrible come downs. They start experiencing dysphoria, even T plus 7 hours, right? When they come down, they feel awful. Having talked to thousands of users, think this is correlated with pre-existing depression or some kind of vulnerability in your serotonin system. And if that happens to you, you might consider lessening your use. But 5-HTP or again a fluoxetine, a Prozac, or an SSRI on the come down is not dangerous. It actually dislodges the MDMA and provides some neuroprotection, allowing your brain to rebuild its serotonin more quickly. If you do experience depression, while I agree with many of my friends and a lot of people that SSRIs are overprescribed, pharmaceuticals just want to make money, I've also seen them work miracles on a lot of people, including people in my own family. So, if you're having horrible come downs like that, you might want to think about, am I suffering from depression, and make a determination, a risk assessment or a benefit assessment, whether you would rather feel good all the time or feel terrific, once a week when you do your MDMA, and decide that for yourself. Sorry, I couldn't give you any more solutions to that. You're one of those?
No.
Okay. Someone back there? Yeah.
What percentage of the parents that you've been in contact with take a more conservative stance and maybe advocate for prohibition or stronger regulation?
I haven't talked to any parents who have actively started advocating for stricter prohibition. Generally speaking, they'll either respond to me when I reach out to them or they won't. And then there's conflicts within families too. I've had sisters or brothers reach out to me, but they don't want to get involved because their parents are still just distraught, grieving, and haven't yet made the connection between the drug war and their child's fatality.
For what percentage? I know it's hard.
I encourage you to reach out to families too and find that out. I couldn't tell you that. I know I worked with a number of families back in my early days with Dance Safe, and I'm working with 3 mothers now. More important question to me is why is it always mothers? Even the opiate mothers, Moms United against the war on drugs, it was all mothers. No fathers were out there, So.
To add to your point though about sort of seeing one-sided is what's more in the public view, is that a certain percentage of these deaths result in lawsuits. And generally speaking, the families that are involved in lawsuits take it a very, very low profile. They don't want to say anything under the advice of their lawyers. And so that, I think, confounds what the actual numbers are because they're not as outspoken about it.
Yeah, I would say in Bo's case as well as Shelley's, the police were not pursuing, any charges against the supplier, and that freed both the family and their friends to be able to speak. A big stumbling block has been just what Joseph said, they want to get involved, and these cases can last years, where they're not able. So we can't even get the toxicology results. We don't know anything about some of these cases because there's criminal charges being pursued, and the lawyers of everyone involved are saying, just keep your mouth shut. How many? There's 3 of the families that I reached out to out of a dozen, but those were the ones I knew about, who at least told me, I can't speak to you because there are criminal charges happening. So, you know, it's too many. I can tell you a story that happened in 1999, which is incredible. It's astounding to me. I went to visit a family in Miami whose daughter died of PMA. And, you know, as I was doing at the time to get, you know, see if they wanted to advocate for harm reduction. And when I pulled up to their house, there were 2 police cars with police in them parked in front of their house. And I would walk by and I would walk up and, hello, introduce myself, you know, why are there cops in front? They told me the story that their daughter's boyfriend gave her the pills, and he was hospitalized also, but he survived, and she died. And not only was the prosecution wanting to prosecute him for murder, they were pursuing the death penalty against an 18-year-old boy who also accidentally consumed adulterated ecstasy. And she was white, and he was Latino, and the Cuban community in Miami obviously was outraged that the state wants to kill another child. He was 18, but someone's child, because of an accident. The family told me they were good Christians, they wouldn't let that happen, and it ended up not happening. But that shows you the insanity of the drug war. You know, that prohibition created an adulterated market that killed someone and almost killed her boyfriend, and they want to execute the boyfriend in order to relieve themselves of the guilt because that they know in some deep level that drug policies are wrong. It's really insane. I don't know if that's still happening today, but there's still, whenever anyone dies, it's like rush to put someone in jail, rush to blame somebody, except the system that is creating the problem to begin with.
And there's also a lot of civil suits, in addition to the criminal ones, in cases where families are upset. They blame the festival for example, we're talking about reports at Paradiso, they didn't have adequate medical services. Well, that could be negligence on the part of the promoter. And you know, some people take it out through criminal prosecution. Sometimes they take their grief out through civil prosecution. And that too produces that confounding result where they're not necessarily speaking out because they have their own vested interest in not doing so.
How many of you, I guess, look, making sure here, yeah, everyone here looks kind of younger, at least not old enough to have teenagers who might be using MDMA. So I want to ask, how many of you here who have used MDMA have talked to your parents about it? Raise your hand. 6 out of this room. Because you have exceptionally cool parents? Yeah. Yeah, that's a problem, right? And usually it's the other way around. I'm willing to bet that a majority of the people in this room's parents used an illicit drug at some point in their past, whether it was LSD in the 60s or whatever. But parents don't want to talk to their kids about drugs because they don't know how to, and they're afraid of getting in trouble. You know, afraid if you talk openly, honestly with your child about drugs, maybe that's going to help them, but maybe they're going to go and tell their friend, oh, my mom said this and that, and then their friend's parents are going to, you know, think that you're being irresponsible. There's all of these issues around, you know, how the drug war prevents open, honest communication between teachers and students, between parents and their kids. I want to show this in my film. I want to model in my movie, you know, better ways of speaking to teenagers about drugs, and I will.
So we hate to cut you off, but we have room until like 10. So I think if anyone has any last minute questions, they can feel free to come up to Emmanuel and ask him personally or Heather. And other than that, I think that we are done for today. And you guys can stay if you want, but for the most part, like the events.
Just one announcement. So Dancing has their kits available online for $60. I was at the drug policy conference 2 weeks ago, and they had testing on site, and I brought in a friend's batch of MDMA, and it came up as bath salts. And that's when I realized that so often we wouldn't take what we were taking if we actually knew what it was. And it's the holiday seasons, tell your friends you love them, buy them a drug testing kit.
Even if you're super broke, just a marquee reagent test is $20, and all it's got to do is turn black, and you just shave off a little bit, one drop. That's how you know at least it's. Sadly, it doesn't tell you whether it's MDA. It tells you whether it's MDA or MDMA, but close enough, right? It's enough if you're a broke college student.
Yeah, I meant to bring a few kits with me to give out, but I did. I just left them in my car. So.
You can also contact your local Bay Area dance and
Yeah,
these things for you.
talk to the green-haired guy there. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Alisa.